Hey you, and welcome. In this video, we will use the useContext hook of React. We will do that by creating a context provider and consuming that from different components. So let's dive right into it. I want to start by creating a new component where all the changes, all the events that happen in my app can be logged in a list. So let's start by doing that first. I will do that down here. And for now, I will work with an array of strings. That's what the data structure is going to be like for these logs. It's just array of strings. Each string says some message, and that's my logs. And I will render that out under the button paragraphs. So under line number 20, I will start a new JSX JavaScript inside JSX curlies. And I will provide it an array. This is an empty array for now. I will map through this array. This is perfectly fine. You can do that. Of course, you can assign the array like so and then use that down here. That's perfectly fine as well. However, I'm just working with array as is. That's perfectly fine in JavaScript. I'll do .map, and then each item will be a string value. And for each item, I will return JSX as it. So I don't need curlies, I need parentheses. I'll create a new line and I'll start with li item. I'm creating a list using HTML list. So I should create UL at top, so unorganized list. So above line 21, I will start UL tag. And the closing tag will go under the JSX JavaScript that I'm writing. All right, save that. All right, so for every item, I just want to render the item inside the li. That's it. Save that. Nothing should render because my array is empty. I will type in a message 2. With the messages typed in, we can see that the messages are rendering in a list. So that's perfect. That's my new component. Now I want to expand the functionality to say any component can add a log into this event. And for me to do that, I have to put this into a state. So I'll copy the array, take that away from here, and create a new state. I'll use my useState hook that we have been working with previously. And this time it will be a type of array with string, and this would say message 2, and it will be in logs and set logs, and logs is an array, so I will logs map. Everything should be satisfied. I'll go ahead and save that. And the messages change, of course, because now it's coming from state. However, I do have this set logs where I can pass it down to, let's say, button in this case, on log or something. Let's call it on log here. And then same thing with paragraph. I can say, if you want to say something or you want to put that on the log, you can pass that based on log. So I'm passing props to every one of these components. That's one of the things why Context API is very valuable. You don't have to do something called prop drilling. That's what we're doing. We're passing props to many components that may be reusable props, and we don't want to have to really TypeScript each one of this in every component. Like in paragraph, if I go into it, I have to go to the definition. I have to say on log documentation and void. I have to provide it that this can be a message can be a type of string, and this same type has to go in every single component that may be using onLog, which is too much prop drilling. So that's a perfect candidate for us to start using Context API. All right, so in order to get started with that, I will first remove the changes I made, the onLog changes. Perfect. With that change, I'll keep my line number 8 here for now. We will change that in a bit. I will start a new file in the components folder of our file explorer. I'll create a new file right here and call this logs provider. I'm using camel case. And remember, the components in React will always be uppercase first, because that's otherwise if there's lowercase first, you may create a button component, but you're actually talking about the button component in HTML versus button component capital B would be a custom button component that you create. So that's why uppercase first makes it so that it's a custom component, not an HTML tag. All right, so logs provider has been created. I will hide my file explorer, and I'll start by writing my boilerplate. This one here, I'll just import React. Okay, and then export const logs provider, like so, null, and then I'm exporting by name. I'm not doing default export, and this will handle children because provider is always on top of the app or on top of somewhere where you need to provide context to the children. So in this case, I will import function component type and props with children type and use them accordingly. Right after logs provider, function component, diamond brackets, provide props children right there, and that's good enough. Now I should have access to children, and TypeScript should not worry about that. Self-closing fragment and children. Perfect. So far what we have created is a component that can handle children, but it will provide it back to you without making any changes to it. And what I want to do is mount it to make sure nothing breaks. And usually the providers would be mounted on the very root level of the app. That's not always true. Of course, you can use them within a certain component, but in my case, this is going to be on the root level. So the entire app will have access to the context that this context provider will provide. Right. So with that, I'll go to File Explorer, go to the root of my application, which is index.tsx. Right under line number 10, I will mount this logs provider. And notice that it's auto importing for me using relative path. That's also one of the features of VS Code. I believe it's coming from the extension. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm not going to import that manually. Close that as non-self-closing, and then the entire app becomes child of this provider. All right, I'm going to save this. Perfect. The app renders, which means our provider is working. Now I have to actually start using the context API. So let's go back to logs provider. And here I will copy over the line number 8 from app.tsx, which we had written before, which is the array of messages. I will cut this, save. And for now, I will comment out the UL line. I did that by pressing command / while highlighting the lines that I want to comment out. It will automatically comment them for me. And this is true for every language. If you may be writing in HTML or CSS or anywhere, command / will comment it out for you in VS Code. All right, saving that. And going back to logs, I will paste the line that I just copied. All right. And then use state is not there, so I have to import it. I have two options. I can import that by going up here and typing use state directly. That's one way, or another way would be to use the IDE to auto import for me, and I do that by pressing down option return on Mac. It may be different on yours, but you can even highlight the screen and say quick fix and update the import. Both of them do the same thing. Perfect. With that done, now I have to create a context. So I will import create context from React. And this can be outside of the component, outside of the lifecycle of React, because this is a constant. So I'll start with export const. We do need to export that because the components that may be consuming the context will be importing our context from here. So I'll just export that as is, and I'll call this logs context equals to create context. Context always has to have a value. In this case, that's why it's complaining. So usually what we would work with is an object type. So I can just start curlies and press enter, and that would stop the complaining portion there, and I'll just save. So my context now is created. It just holds no value. That's about it. So let's make it so that it holds a value. The concept here would be that I want to provide a function that can be called by any component, and that function, when it's called, you have to provide me a string as an argument, and I will log that for you in a log component. All right, so it's a callback function basically. I'll press enter on line number 9. I'll start writing add log, which would be a function. Oh, sorry, we're not TypeScripting right now. We are just providing an initial value. Every value in the context API needs to have at least an initial value so you don't run into undefined errors. And that's what we're doing. We're providing it as a function, which has nothing to do. It's almost an empty function, right? So I'll save that. Let's also type our context. So I will create an interface here calling it iLogs context props. and this would have a value of add log, and add log will be a function that returns a void. That means it returns nothing, and you will accept a message as an argument, and that message would be a type of string. And to create context, what is the type of the object, we will provide that in a diamond bracket right before the parentheses, but after the create context, and paste the name of our interface that we just created. Perfect. And if I didn't have add log at this point, it will start complaining. So that TypeScript is helping us out, letting us know that, hey, this initial value is missing, make sure you have it. And this is a required type, not an optional type. So add log is always required. That means add log will at least have an empty function in the beginning, and eventually we will provide you the actual implementation of the function. All right, so let's work on the actual implementation of the function. Next, what I'll do is under on line number 21, I will start parentheses because now we have to go multiple lines, so parentheses is the way to go. And instead of a fragment, I will start using my logs context dot, and I have the option of provider. So that's how you provide a context to all the children inside the context provider. Now it is complaining. Reason for that is because you do need to provide the values of what the context will hold, in this case add log function. So we have to start by saying value. It would be an object type, and value, you would notice that it's complaining is because of our type scripting. So it will say that we are expecting add log, but you're not providing that to us. So let's start doing that. I will start by creating add log as a function and provide an empty function here. Sorry, pressing too many keys at once. Let's do that. Perfect. So that stopped complaining, but still the implementation on line number 21 is missing. I do want add log to call set logs. So let's do that. I will start by writing set logs and provide it with an array of existing messages. So spread out existing messages first, and then the new message that is coming in as an argument here, message string. That argument will be passed over here like this. So that would implement my add logs function. And one more thing I have to do is, not only should the components be able to set the logs, but they should, or add the logs in this case, they should also be read the logs. So I should provide another context, which is logs, which is an array of strings. That's the documentation portion of it. Now in the context, initial value of this array of logs would be empty array, like so. And then the actual value on line number 28 would be logs. Save that, and that's our context provider ready to get consumed. I will make one more change on line number 21. I will make the array empty. And now it's complaining because array empty means it can be an array of anything. So I do have to provide a TypeScript to use state. I'll say it will be a string array, and initially it will be empty array, which is fine. All right, save that. Perfect. Next thing would be on app.tsx. I can uncomment our UL, and we can start providing it logs. And how do we do that? Well, the entire app.tsx is inside the logs provider, so we have access to the context. And to use context, we have to import a hook called useContext from React. So let's call that useContext. And I will use that all the way at the top, right under the line number 6 for app. I will say useContext, and it's going to provide me some values. I'll destructure those out. And in the useContext is going to take an argument. The argument would be the context that we had created for the logs provider. And in order to import that, I will go to import, destructure that out from relative path to components and logs provider. Now remember, in logs provider now we have two exports. One, the actual provider, the component, and the other one is the context that we need in this case. So let's see what we get. We have logs context and logs provider. The one I need is the logs context. So that's the one I'm going to use. Copy that over, provide it to use context. And notice what happens when I try to destructure the values. If I press Control Space, IntelliSense starts helping me. Reason why is because TypeScript. We provided the types in the use context, in the logs context, and now we are reaping the benefit of that. So in this case, I will say just give me logs, and I will render them out underneath. So if I save that, My component should just work. However, there are no logs right now, so there's nothing to render. So let's start populating logs into it. And so what we have to do is do the same thing as we did for useContext in app.tsx. I will do something in button.tsx. Jump to definition, and I can just use useContext again. This time I'm going to auto import that. Let's do that. So under line number 10, useContext, auto import, destructure. I will also try and auto import logs context, like so. And I need add logs, add log, one log at a time, perfect. And every time the click happens, I want it to log an event. Button was clicked, like so. Save that, and let's see if that works for us. Perfect, it is working. So our logs context API is working just fine. I'll see you all in the next video.